Today we're going to talk about plot, which is our next fiction topic. I want you guys to be using, hopefully you have this document open. We're going to work through definitions in my PowerPoint, and you guys are going to be putting in definitions on that sheet. Okay, so plot are the events or action in the story, and that goes right up here. So plot, the events or action in a story. Okay? Every story has a certain format, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's do a quick review. Conflict is the problem in the story, and there are 6 types of conflict. Individual versus, we know there's individual versus self. We know there's individual versus individual, individual versus nature, individual versus supernatural, individual versus society, individual versus technology. So on we call this our plot map or our plot diagram. We want to make sure we're incorporating all parts of the story. So we're going to include some other things. We've also studied characterization. So let me flip back here. Characterization. Remember, characterization is how an author describes a character, how an author creates a character for a reader. We have 2 main types of characters we're going to be talking about. Protagonist, the main character with a problem, and antagonist, the the person, people, or force that caused the problem for the protagonist. So if you come back here, we're going to put those right here. Okay, protagonist and antagonist. All right. And you can stop this anytime, remember. So let's keep going. Our setting, here's a term most of you know, but we want to make sure that you understand. Setting is where the story takes place. It includes time, it includes place, and this may be a new word for you, but I want you to learn it. Duration, the amount of time that passes in a story. That's a question that we often see on the SOL, but it's also something that you should just be thinking about as a reader. Is this story take place over the course of a day? Does it take place over the course of a year? Does it take place over the course of a lifetime? As a reader, you should just kind of think about that a little bit. So we're going to switch back, and we are going to put setting up here in this upper corner. Okay, so write the word setting. This is a nice diagram because it includes a lot of the different parts of fiction. Okay, and we've got one more that we need to review, which is theme. And you should remember that theme is the author's message. Usually the theme tells you something about human nature or the way people act. If you forget, here's a little way to remember it. Theme, the message. Isn't that kind of cute? All right, so we're going to just put that definition down here, and you'll often see that in these plot diagrams that we're going to do. So we've got plot, the events and action in the story. We've got conflict in the middle because, of course, the conflict is at the heart of the story. We remember characterization, our protagonist and our antagonist. We talk about setting and theme. Okay, so all the rest of these boxes are going to be the parts of the plot, and I'm going to run you through that right now. All right, so we call this the plot line of the story map. It looks like a mountain because a story tends to start kind of flat. There's like an introduction, and then there's this part here where the conflict starts, and then everything starts to get kind of exciting, and then our protagonist has some kind of a change in their situation, and then things typically will calm down. Not every story uses this. There are a few unusual ones, but most stories, books, movies, TV shows even that you watch and read will follow this plot line. Okay, so we're going to start. The first part. Oh, we're going to talk about the 6 parts first. There are 6 parts to every story. You'll be asked about them on tests. You'll be asked about them in every English class from now until you leave school. So we got to learn them. A lot of you have had these in the past, so hopefully it's a review. If not, learn them. Okay, so the first part of every story is called the exposition. We use the symbol of a handshake because this is where you meet the story. You shake hands with someone when you meet them. So the author is introducing the story to you, and so you're kind of meeting the story. It's where you meet the setting and the characters. So over here on your little plot diagram, we're going to put that right here, the word exposition. Okay? It's right here at the very beginning. The next part of the story is going to be called the initiating event. The initiating event. If we were not on a video, I would tell you to repeat after me. Initiating event. You can say it out loud right now, then I'll know where you are in this video. Initiating event. Okay, another way we call this is the kickoff. You will never see that on a test, but it's a nice way to remember it. And we use a picture of a cleat and a soccer ball to remind you that it's the kickoff of the story. It's where the story really starts. If you remember my story about the oranges in Giant, and I said, you know, if I told you on my way home I went to Giant, that isn't a story, is it? But when I tell you, when I stopped in Giant on my way home and I pulled an apple off the shelf, and all the apples fell on the ground. I think I use oranges usually, but suddenly the story has started. You want to know what happens. There's a problem, and it's started. That's the initiating event. That's where the story starts to get interesting. So that, if you look at our little plot diagram here, that's this corner right here. See how all of a sudden it starts going up? That corner where suddenly you know what the conflict is. That is called the initiating event, the event that starts the action or the conflict, the kickoff. Okay? All right, next part in our story is called the rising action. We use the symbol of a ladder because the story starts to rise. We've got a problem, right? And that problem is going to get worse for a while in the story. Most of the stories in this part, if you look here, this is a long line. It's the biggest part of this line. And it's important to realize that this is actually a timeline. If you stretched it out, if you pull the two ends, this is just a timeline because a story is told in time order. We've just bumped it up to look like a mountain to show where the timeline, where the events in the story get a little more interesting, okay? So think of it as a line, but the way we've pulled it up and down shows you where the story is getting exciting. So this is the part, it's the biggest part of the story, and it's where the suspense, the excitement, suspense is excitement, starts to build. And the main character is usually trying to solve a problem, okay? So here we go, that's right here. We're gonna call this the rising action. And again, here, look how steep it is. It's getting more and more and more exciting, okay? Alrighty then, our next part is called the climax, and we use the symbol of a volcano because there's a change. This can be an exciting part of the story, but sometimes it's not, the conflict isn't something exciting, so it's not a super exciting part. But the way we like you to think of it is where the problem, whatever conflict started here in number 2, has increased, and something changes. Sometimes it gets better. Sometimes it doesn't get better. Sometimes it's just a slight change. But something about that conflict changes. It's a turning point. And you can see it's actually a turn in this line. After it, things are going to kind of calm down a little bit. Okay, and remember, this is a line. I'm going to keep telling you that. All right, so that's called the climax. So let's go put that on our chart. Here's our volcano up here, and we're going to type in the word climax. Go back to our notes. Next is our falling action, and we use that parachute guy, that little guy in the parachute, and he's coming down, down, down. So these are the events after the climax. This is usually a shorter piece of the story. Again, remember, along this line, this is a really long part because most of the story takes place here. This falling action is a really short piece, really, really short. Sometimes in a story, there's just 1 or 2 events, okay? Everything is starting to fall into place, so that's what that parachute guy is coming. He's coming down from this change down toward the end of the story, okay? So put that on your diagram. We've got falling action here. Almost there. And then our very last part of the story is called the resolution, okay? The resolution, we use a picture No, that's not a picture, that's a present. We use a present because the conflict, everything gets all wrapped up at the end like a present, right? Sometimes it's not a happy ending, but still most of the problems are wrapped up in one way or another. It's how the conflict or the problem is solved. Okay, so let's go back to our diagram and let's put in resolution. So again, remember, every story is just a timeline. It's told in time order. But we lift this, it's like we take our little finger and we lift up that timeline to show when the story gets more exciting and when the story calms down a little bit. And as I said, that's how most stories go. Okay, so that is the parts of the plot.